Hey everybody, MS Farzan here, and welcome back to this video series on how to make a 2D multiplayer tabletop card game using Unity and Mirror. In this episode, we're going to accomplish the very straightforward task of how to flip a card so that when I'm dealt a card by the server, I can see it, but you can't see it, and vice versa. And yet, when I play that card, it's then flipped again so that both of us can see it. It's actually, for some reason, this is really fun to me. I think the logic is quite interesting, so hopefully it will be the same to you. So the first thing that I'm going to do here is I'm going to go to my scripts folder and create a new script. I'm just going to call it Card Flipper. I'm going to open this script, and although we will use this in the larger scheme of how our networking works, it doesn't need to derive from network behavior or have a using mirror statement at the top. What it will need, though, is a using Unity engine.ui declaration up here, because we'll be doing some things with sprites. And the reason why we're not really, we don't need to use mirror or derive from network behavior in this particular script is that we're not performing any network functions right in here. It's only the clients are going to utilize this script, but they're not going to, that's going to be after the networking has happened, as we'll see in just a moment. So we don't need anything that's between the curly braces here. We're going to write public sprite card front and a public sprite card back. We want to store two different sprites. What this does, as you'll know already, is if I go to my prefabs and I choose my card 1 prefab, and as you'll also know, I could either just drag the script to the prefab inspector, or I can just add the component and I search for card flipper. I can do it that way. Now that I've done that on my card 1, I can go to my assets folder within the root directory here, the second level of assets here, and I can say that the card front for this is, what do we use for here? We use the cyan ping 3x here. I want to say that the card front here is the cyan ping 3x sprite, and the card back is the cyan back 3x sprite. Now, if you're not using my sprites, you could just create another sprite or download something, whatever you like. But it would be helpful for the purposes of this tutorial to have both a card front and a card back that you're using. Probably you'll have something similar. And then I'll go to my my card 2 prefab, add the card flipper script, and you can organize your inspector as you like in terms of the components. And then grab the magenta back for the card back and the magenta front for the magenta ping for the card front. Those are from my game, Hacker Battles. Okay, so we've done that, and then back in our script, where is it? Okay, we're just going to create a simple public void flip, which is going to govern when to flip the card. And we'll say sprite, a private sprite, current sprite is equal to game object, meaning this game object we're operating on here, this card, dot get component image parentheses and then sprite. Now this really blew my mind when I started to kind of see through the matrix of how Unity works. This was really helpful for me. It's the simplest thing, and you may already know it, and it may be like in the most beginner tutorials, and I totally glossed over it. But when I understood this, it was really helpful for me. Just saying game object obviously means this current game object we're working on, this card. Game object.getComponent type of image. Well, if we look at this game object that we're working on, let's say here, card 2, I'm saying get component. And for me, for the longest time, it was just like, well, where's this component? Where does this live? Well, this actual component called image in the inspector. That's what I'm getting when I say get component type of image. And then I say get component image dot sprite. That means that nested within here is a sprite, and the sprite that I'm referring to is this magenta ping at 3x sprite that so many episodes ago we dragged to this part of the inspector. And just to be able to pair up the code with actually seeing it in the editor in the inspector just made everything so real for me. And perhaps you already know that, and it's no special surprise for me. But anyway, that was a great moment for me. However long ago it started to make sense for me, that some things fell in place for me. So hopefully they will for you as well. Then we're just going to write some simple logic. If current sprite is equal to card front, then game object dot get component image parentheses dot sprite should equal card back. Otherwise, or else, game object dot get component image dot sprite should equal card front. It's pretty straightforward logic. It just means that we know what card front and card back are attached to this card, and then when somebody calls this flip script or flipped method, we want to figure out what is the current sprite. Let's look at the game object, the game object's sprite. If this current sprite is the card front, is the same as the card front that we've stored by dragging it to the inspector, then change the sprite to the card back. Otherwise, if the current sprite is the card back, switch it to the card front. Pretty basic. Let's see where we need to call this. Well, there are two places I can think of. One is in the player manager, where we first deal the cards. Remember that we say that if the card has authority, if the client has authority, then set the parent to the player area. Otherwise, set it to the enemy area. That would be a great place to flip the card. So we can say card dot get component card flipper, which is the card flipper script, and then dot flip. So flip it. What will happen is the card will be spawned by, let's say, client A will request the server to do the spawning. The server will spawn the card over the network, and it will then come to me and to you, to client A and client B. When client A gets it, it has authority over it, so it'll just put it in the player area. When client B, when your client gets it, it will see that it doesn't have authority over it, so it will send it to the enemy area and it will flip it. Now there is one tiny problem here that we won't really address in our video series, is that by doing this, the way we've written this logic, your client does actually know what card it is, and it's just flipping it by changing the sprite. But if you're like super cool hacker, you might be able to determine what card it is, even though the card has been flipped. This is just a visual thing. If you were able to break into the client code, you might be able to see what card it is and then start cheating. So you might have to handle this differently on in your game. Maybe instead of telling instead of telling the client what the card is, or exactly all the information about it, you could just have like a placeholder that's like the card back that just sits there until the card is actually played, and that's the time when you actually spawn the the card across the network. You'll have to handle that differently or use some sort of like anti-cheat if that's something that worries you. It doesn't worry me right now for this game, so we're just using a very basic way of doing this. And then the other thing that we want to do is that when the card is played, we want to determine, well, let's get to there in a second. I don't want to overwhelm you with all this information right now. Right now we're just flipping the card when it hits our scene. So let's wait for it to compile. We'll hit Control B to build. And let's just make sure this is working right before we add any extra functionality. Okay. That's that. And now that that's built, I'm going to hit play here. I'm going to be host in client A, and you can be client B. You draw cards. And now when they appear on my screen, I see that you have 2 magenta cards and 3 cyan entromancy cards, but I can't see what they are. And also can't manipulate them. I'm trying to click and drag, but we made them not draggable, as you'll recall. Then I click on my draw cards. I see my cards, and you see that I have cards, but you don't see which ones they are. And now when I drag and drop, you see that I've dragged and dropped a card, but we haven't flipped that card. So let's do that right now. I'll Alt F4 out of this and stop the server from running. And we'll go into back into our player manager, and we'll say else if type equals played. We'll say if we don't have authority over it, card.getComponent, card flipper, and flip it. The reason why we check for authority is probably already obvious to you, that if we do have authority over it, that means that we can see the card. We don't need to flip it. But if we don't have authority and we receive a remote procedure call that a card has been spawned and should be sent to the drop zone, if we don't have authority over that, then that means we're looking at the card back and we need to flip it so we can see the card front. Save our script. Go ahead and build the game. And now that the game is built, spoke too soon, still building. I'll spin up the server. Make sure that I spin up the client at the same time, otherwise things might get wonky. Draw cards, draw cards. Now when I drag a blue card into the drop zone, it appears here, and then let's see, I see in client B, your client, you have 2 pink cards. I can see them up here. So when you drag this card, drop it into the drop zone, and it shows up in the drop zone. Now you're missing a pink card up here, and the pink card has correctly populated in my drop zone. And I can't drag either of them because we make them not draggable when they're dropped. Great, that's working awesome. We now know how to use the card flipper, and you might need to use it in other scenarios, and that's all great. So I hope you've enjoyed this video and it's been helpful for you. If it has, please be sure to like it and subscribe to my channel for more. And you can also check out my books and games by following the link in the description for this video. And also follow me on Twitter, and we'll see you soon.